I thought I'd start by pointing out the area around Sunburg where Elmo grew up, and Bruton, uh, where Elmo lived during his adult years. Bruton and Sunburg are actually quite close to each other. They're about 80 miles west of Minneapolis, and it's also close to Wilmer and Benson and St. Cloud. St. Cloud's also in the surrounding areas. So it gives you some idea of the geography of the area. My process was to use Find a Grave website to see if the names on the sheet music could be correlated with a grave in the area around the area where Elmo grew up. For example, one piece of music referring to Olo Flolo's trio, I looked up the names on Find a Grave and verified that they were buried in the appropriate place, noted their birth dates and their birth years. But Elmo's spelling was sometimes a little bit of a problem, but nothing that couldn't be sounded out. Very often, Find a Grave just gave the listed the death year. So the next step that I had was I went to the Minnesota Historical Society and dug through for free. You can go through and look up death certificates. The death certificates gave me the exact month and day and additional information about the person's occupation, names of parents, names of spouses, which was useful. Two of the people that I was researching, I found they died by suicide, which speaks a bit to the depression in rural America and the pressures of operating small farms. Once I had an exact death date, I would go to one of the newspapers. Mostly I was going through the Wilmer Times and searching through their obituaries. The obituaries sometimes had really good nuggets of information, but mostly I searched for descendants. From a descendant, I might be able to ask for photographs or stories. 2016 was an election year, so I was nervous about telephoning people cold. So I wrote a letter telling about the project, what we were doing, and included the sheet music that I was asking about. I told them that I would be telephoning them. This all worked really well, except there was one occasion where I sent the letter and I gave the call. The husband picked up, I explained who I was and referenced the letter. Husband called his wife. She came to the phone and slammed the receiver down without saying a word. I found out later through another relative that what had conspired here was that the musician in question had had an affair and had fathered another child. The woman that I called had been unaware of her half brother until after the funeral of her father. And she probably still had really big feelings about, the betrayal of her father. So yeah, I'm not using any of that stuff. That musician is not in here. Farmers Directory was another great resource that I had through the Minnesota Historical Society, which you could look up the farmers' names and their family and where they were located, which was extremely useful. Also, when I went on one of my field trips at the Wilmer Historical Society, I found this 1927 land ownership map, which displayed, where the farms were. So, I could find the Wicks and I could find Jorgensen's and other such. I could Ole Flolo. I found them. Havel Wig. Found them where they were all and in relation to each other. The first big hit that I had was Olaus Jorgensen's Waltz, and this was one that I had when I read the bottom. I learned this tune from my grandmother's brother, Olaus, who played the guitar with his feet as he played the fiddle at the same time. He also repaired and made fiddles. So go through the exercise. I mean, this piqued my curiosity. I just had to find out about that. Found his obituary, and lo and behold, that led me to Gordon Jorgensen, who was Olaus's grandson. Gordon was born and raised in Sundberg, and according to Gordon, everyone in Sundberg spoke Norwegian because everyone in the town were from or had descended from Norway, except for the undertaker, Mr. Dahlquist. He was from Sweden, which is one of the reasons why they said in Sundberg that the Swedes will always get you in the end. Now, Gordon owned one of the fiddles that his grandfather had made, and he was proud to show it to me and let me photograph it, which was here, and a homemade bow that was, and that's the inside, the note that Olaus had put inside when he made that fiddle in 1942. So more photographs of the fiddle. Gordon also showed me a 1895 photograph of Olaus with his wife. They had two boys. Olaus was the town carpenter. He built a lot of barns and houses in and around Sundberg. His wife, Inga, or Ida, I've seen them both ways. She died in 1936, and Olaus lived alone in the house. So Gordon used to walk over to his grandfather's house, and he would hear and see him practicing his guitar and fiddle. So in 1956, when Gordon came back from college for the summer, he photographed his grandfather's invention. Oh, that's the death of Mrs. Jorgensen. But there is Olaus playing the guitar while he's playing the fiddle. So he would strum the beat with his right foot, and with his left foot, he could change chords. Like I said, this guy was the town handyman. He built just about everything, and he was kind of he was inventing his own guitar strumming. So strum the beat with his right foot, and left foot he could change chords. And once I got this image of Olaus playing the fiddle and guitar, I knew we had a successful tune book. I mean, that was the caper, and this was early on in the project. And during one of my field trips, I went and found Olaus's house still there. You can actually see this window here. Is this window here. So yeah, that was my first big hit. The second tune that tickled my fancy was the Henshin Lake Schottish, which had that story. You know, I heard my grandfather and the Henshin brothers from near Sibley State Park play this tune on the Hardanger fiddles way back in 1929. So I did some research. I started looking up Sibley State Park, which was created in 1919. I can now see that Henshin Lake is within Sibley State Park. Also saw a map of the same area in 1874, which did not show Henshin Lake. So that lake got created sometime after 1874, but yeah, sometime after the Henshins lived there. I found an 1895 census of the Henshin family. So you had P.L. Henshin, which turned out to be Peter Henshin, and his wife Anna, and two daughters, Jenny and Hilma. And then you had three brothers, Otto, Vern, and Leslie. Jenny became the school teacher in Bruton eventually, and Leslie married and moved to Minneapolis. So I guessed that the two brothers that were there in 1929 that were playing Hardanger was Otto and Vern. So there we go, obituaries. I kept sending obituaries to Mary Pat, and she really, really appreciated it. Anna Henshin, I was actually at the Wilmer Historical Society when I ended up coming across Peter Henshin's, the father's obituary. He died in 1909 after having suffered from paralysis for 7 years. So this family of mother and 5 kids are caring for an invalid for 7 years in a house with no running water, no central heating, no electricity, and just had to be brutal. Isolated house, in the midst of these lakes. How brutal was it? Oh, there we go. Sorry. Also, the Henshin brothers end up in the Wilmer Tribune, the New London section. So the Henshin brothers were playing fiddles in 1914. But how brutal was it? Well, the draft registration of 1917, all 3 of the brothers were rejected on physical. They had, rheumatism, they had weak backs, infirmity, a 21-year-old with infirmity. So they all got rejected by the registration board for World War I as young men. So it had to be a really hard life. They still had to work out ownership of the house in 1915. They still had probate court after the death in 1909. And while I was on my little field trip, I drove out there and I found the spot where the house had once been. So yeah, they arrived in 1890, according to this. Came to Minnesota from Norway and Sweden. There's the kids. And the homestead was deeded and eventually made it part of Sibley State Park and the Henshin House as it appeared in 1919. So that's where Elmo saw his grandfather playing fiddle with the Henshin brothers in 1929. And as such, I thought I would play that tune as well. I'd been memorizing that Henshin Lake Schottish, and I recorded myself playing the tune in the same spot where it had been played 87 years previous. Now, truth be told, I don't think I played it in the same key as Vernon Otto played it. I was playing it as Elmo had written it in the key of F, where I had to shift up into 3rd position. After taking some Hardanger lessons that summer and being told you don't play anything besides 1st position on a Hardanger, I'm guessing that this tune was originally played in the key of A, and Elmo transposed it to F to make it more impressive. Another tune with curious notes on it was this mazurka after Carl Amundsen. Appears to be 3 generations of fiddlers, Carl, Harris, and Kenny. After a single Google search, I found Kenny. He's got his own violin shop. And so the same weekend that I visited Henshin Lake, I also drove out to Benson, about 20 miles west of Sunburg, to visit Kenny's shop. And I met with Kenny just as he was about to leave for a fishing trip to Canada, but he showed me one of Elmo's fiddles. And we talked about some of the local fiddlers of the 20th century, including Ken's grandfather, Carl, who played for dances like this one from 1908. And 1910, he was listed in the newspapers as playing for dances. Another Starbuck, 1910. So Carl's son Harris also played violin. This picture from right near his death. There's Harris again. And Harris playing with his band. He had played with the Syverson and Amundsen Orchestra. This is from 1934. And Kenny had a copy of, well, a rather abused copy of a big poster that they had. The Amundsen Syverson band, 4 players, Stanley Syverson on accordion, Art, guitar and banjo, Violet Amundsen on piano or organ. And they played a little bit of everything: Scottish, German, Irish, Polish. Yeah, they played in the 1930s. This was made from 1934. Yeah. So that was, and Harris Amundsen's. Next one, actually, Ken Amundsen still had contact with Arlen Erickson, who retired and moved to Arizona. I contacted Arlen, who sent me photos and music and some stories. Arlen, this is him right here, was born in 1942 and played keyboard for Elmo. So what he could tell me of the early years was mostly what he could remember hearing from Elmo. Arlen claimed that he taught Elmo how to write music. So Arlen had been in the military during the Vietnam years and played trumpet in an army band and had played. But his dad, Arlen's dad, Herbert, who was born in 1912, farmed near Starbuck and played fiddle, though I didn't find any newspaper articles or much about his performances. But I just have this one photograph of him. There was one and only one tune named after a woman, and that was Ragnhild Pavrod's Waltz. So the question was, did Ragnhild compose this tune? Was this her favorite tune? I found one completely useless obituary. Thor, you're not crushing it here, fella. This is one of the most pathetic obituaries I ever found. It really didn't get me anywhere. And so I ended up approaching this from, that's her death certificate. I ended up tackling this from the Gafkin. Henry Gafkin had written this piece called Ragnhild Pavrod's Waltz, but it turns out, and he was from North Dakota. However, it turns out that he was originally born in Sunburg, and his family moved to Dakota when he was 12 years old. And while his family lived in Sunburg, he was in very close proximity where both Elmo and Ragnhild lived. So while researching Henry Gafkin, I got a hold of a family historian who got me in touch with a descendant of Ragnhild Pavrod, who was living in Texas. It turns out Ragnhild was the aunt of Henry Gafkin. So you had, and her maiden name was Ragnhild Loken. So she married Thor. Thor was the sister of Radina, which was Henry Gafkin's mother. And according to her granddaughter, I should probably also mention, it turns out Ragnhild was the aunt. Yeah. Ragnhild and her husband moved from Sunburg to Bruton. So in later years, Ragnhild was living near where Elmo once lived. And there we go. According to Ragnhild's granddaughter, she was unaware if her great-grandmother was musical. She didn't know if she played piano or fiddle. If so, she only played for herself. So and this is a picture of Ragnald from about 1930. So she's here center. Thor is on the left. Ragnald's daughter is here. Ragnald's granddaughter is here. Did I say I was talked to her great granddaughter? So this was the mother of the gal that I was talking to. This is that small baby. So just before we published the tune book, Lee Cowan pointed out that Ragnald Peverod's waltz was actually Reginald's waltz. From Reg Bouvet, Manitoba fiddler, which he recorded in 1967. So Ragnald Loken Paverud died in 1961, so she never would have heard this tune. Both Elmo and Henry knew Ragnald and were thinking that maybe Reginald simply reminded both of them of Ragnald. So, Ragnald's waltz. So, one of the later pieces to be added to the project was Ole's waltz, played by Ole Kjeldal for dances in the 1890s. I couldn't find a lot about Ole Kjeldal. His father was Soren Kjeldal, who immigrated to the U.S. with his family in 1848 when he was 12 years old. Soren settled in North Fork Township, just north of Bruton, where he married and raised a family. Ole Kjeldal was born in 1877, so it's quite possible that he played for dances in the 1890s. The only Kjeldal that I could find who had musical recitals was Ole's niece, Viola. Viola Kjeldal was born on Valentine's Day in 1917. She was in the papers for winning spelling bees, but she also had some She also had some notoriety for appearing in newspapers or performing accordion solos. So she showed up quite a bit. Here she is, accordion solo again. This is 1931. Entertained us with her accordion. This is Bruton Review, again, 1931, 1932, accordion solos, accordion solo 1933. And, she actually was valedictoria in her high school class, so she was quite smart. I mean, she was winning the spelling bees. She got married in 1939 to Harlan Lee, and she kind of drops off the radar, off the newspaper radar at least. And they have 3 children, 3 boys, and she shows up again. Whoops, it's Kjeldal. Yeah. So there was her son performs in 1957, and she was doing accompaniment for her middle child, Joe Lee. So she was playing the piano for him. But at the Minnesota Historical Society, I found a book, centennial book about Bruton. Bruton, 1886, 1986. Those were the days, my friend, by John Boehmer. In that book, it mentions a dance band, Al Jay and his orchestra, and the band had a number of part-time musicians who would rotate through the lineup whenever they could. Mr. Boehmer was kind enough to list some of the members, including Viola Lee, Elmo Wick, another one is Stanley Syverson, is a familiar name, and the Sagadal family, Oliver, Henry, Edward, and yeah. So yeah, I started looking up. Al Jay started showing up in 1963, and they played, the fair, and they played barn dances. So that's probably around this time. The kids were out of the house, and she had more time to get back to her accordion. During the 1970s, Viola was involved in the Snooze Boulevard concerts, and she also played a yearly Norway Days at Minnehaha Park, which ran from the 1950s till 2015. I encountered a relative of Viola Keljal Lee at Niswasdamen in 2016, and she sent me a photograph of the cover of Viola's LP. Oops, and this is another one. Viola Lee or Viola Keldal. This is her with her brothers and sisters. So, but there she is on her LP, which is out there. So I'm guessing that she intersected with Elmo and passed on her uncle's waltz to Elmo while they were playing together in Al J's orchestra. Another one that I was searching for was Cliff Gandrud. So I found out Cliff Gandrud served in World War II. I figured out that he grew up on a farm just west of Sunburg. According to his obituary, he served in North Africa and Italy. When he returned from the war, he worked for the Great Northern Railroad. Before the war, when he was 21 years old, he played accordion in a band called the Tunesmith, along with Henry Sagadal. More about him later. In 1941, the Tunesmiths were racking up gigs and had a half-hour radio program on Wilmer's radio station, KWLM. So, yeah, in the 1930s and 40s, having your own radio program made you a rock star. World War II and marriage put the brakes on all of that. However, there's Tunesmiths again. I discovered an article in which Cliff, after the war, did a 15-minute radio program. He did this one is 1959, but he showed up in 1946, and he also shows up on another radio station in 1951. So he had a program on KWLM in 1946, which is Wilmer. He was broadcasting from WJON in St. Cloud in 1951. In 1959, he ends up with his program at KBMO Benson. And he's usually playing in the afternoons if you look at all of these. The point here is that Cliff Gandrud still kept playing his accordion on the radio, and Elmo, while driving his truck for Candy Ojai, probably listened to Cliff's programs. So we got to this part. All during the summer of 2016, I kept hearing about the Sagadals. Ken Amundsen spoke highly of the family fiddling dynasty. Elmo made clear that there were 3 generations of very good fiddlers, Elling Sagadal, Ole Sagadal, and Oliver. I read in the Bruton Centennial book, 1886, Those Were the Days, my friend, by John Boehmer, mentions the 3 generations, and that Elling was a hardanger maker and was noted for his violin music, which he passed on. So Elling, Ole, and Kari Loken had eight boys, of which I was really centering on Henry a bit and on Oliver, especially Oliver, because everyone was saying this guy's the best. So yeah, there's no mention of hardanger. However, I found an article from the Hardanger Fiddle Association. Soundpost, Elling's Sagadal's Hardangers were quite the collector item. So he'd also spent some time in Spring Grove, Minnesota, and in 1852, and finally, they finally ended up in Norway Lake Township near Sundberg. It was kind of a nice article, and they talk about Oliver and Henry playing professionally, the Jolly Four, which played social events, playing on KWLM and Rudy's old timer programs. And you see Elmo showing up at that time, Elmo was also involved in the Hardanger Fiddle Association of America. I found a newspaper article from 1924 where Edward Wick, Elmo's grandfather, and Ole Sagadal went out in North Dakota to help with the harvest. The obituary gave me a photo of Ole. And since that time, I found out where that photo was from. Basically, this is a photo from 1905. There's Ole Sagadal. Oliver Sagadal is here. Henry Sagadal was still not born. And there's Carrie Loken. So the Wicks and the Sagadals only lived like 2 miles apart. The Sagadal house was down here. Havel Wig and Elmo Wick were within this square mile. And actually, I was able to drive out and see the Sagadal house. So that's where the family lived. Let's see. Henry Sagadal, the guy who played with Cliff Gandrud on the radio with Tunesmiths in 1940, he eventually settled down and purchased a garage and gas station in Bruton in 1942. I found a photograph of Henry Sagadal and a short write-up in the book Bruton Characters of the Last Millennium by John Boehmer, published in 2000. In the book, Mr. Boehmer said that Henry ran the garage and was constantly overhauling engines on cars and tractors, but he also played in the Pee Wee band. Pee Wee and his Hey Kings started showing up about 1964. However, I was really interested in Oliver Sagadal. Everyone was unanimous that Oliver was the best, and sure enough, digging through the newspapers, he makes his first appearance in 1923 when he's 20 years old. He was called a well-known musician. He starts showing up in fiddle contests about 1926. He wins the one in Wilmer. 1929, the violin player from near Sundberg has been visiting. So early on, he's considered hot stuff. He starts showing up on the radio in Yankton. This one was kind of interesting. In 1931, he was playing on the radio twice in one day. KSOO Sioux Falls at 6 p.m. and then WNAX Yankton at 11 p.m. So turn your radio dials. This guy is a double rock star. After a summer of searching for Oliver, I got an obituary from Salem, Ohio, where Oliver lived the last 7 years of his life and died there. And that obituary, which the Salem Historical Society was kind enough to mail to me, I was able to find Oliver's daughter, Joan. So a couple of days before we're about to go to print with the tune book, I drive to meet with Oliver's daughter, Joan, at North Branch, Minnesota, and she produces the motherload of information. She had this photograph of her parents, Bernice and Oliver. She had pictures of her dad. She had pictures of the Sagadal brothers, on the farm that I had visited. One of the difficulties I had in tracking down the Sagadals was there were sometimes Sagadalen, E-N at the end, sometimes Sagadal, D-A-L, and sometimes it was Sagadal, D-A-H-L. And according to Joan, sometime between World War I and World War II, the family thought their name was too German. So they officially changed their names, and the brothers were split between having the H's at the end, H-L, or just L. So that was that part of the story. She also had her great-grandfather's Hardangers, one of her great-grandfather's Hardangers. So it was kind of nice to be able to get a look at it and do a bit of a photo shoot on this Hardanger that her great-grandfather had made. There were some of the photographs and just the detail that went into Elling Sagadal's instrument. And Joan also had a book called Where the Buffalo Fish Abound, Pictorial History of Kandiyohi, published in 1994. She turned to a page and she pointed at it and she says, "That's my dad on the set of KWLM with Morris Chargo." So there's her dad. There is Morris Chargo. And this was what it said, Jack Lynch left, Morris Chargo, photographed in 1945. It was, the other thing was interesting. KWLM was founded in 1940 on the Armistice Day blizzard. And Joan had a story that her mom and dad were going between gigs during the Armistice Day blizzard, and they were lucky enough to be stopped not far from a farmhouse where they could wait out the storm. So just another interesting aside. After Joan was born, her parents kind of settled down. Oliver became a carpenter, and he just sort of played for fun, but his professional days of playing sort of came to an end with their daughter's birth. But this Morris Chargo resolved a big issue. One thing, after having talked with Joan, I went back in the car and I was like texting Mary Pat, it's like, "I got pictures. I got stuff. Hold the presses." So it was kind of fun. But that resolved an issue about, could not figure out what this Morris Chargo was. And Morris Chargo was in fact Morris Chargo, the band leader. And it didn't take a whole lot of searching. Here he is, 1942. This is probably around the time that Elmo was playing with his chore boys. Painesville, 1948. This is by the time I think Elmo had moved on. Morris Chargo, your chore boy, and his Royal Scandinavians. Here we are. Another dance with the Royal Scandinavians, 1949. What I really came across with was the wild animal hoax, where Morris Chargo was running out of material, and he started talking about making up a story that there were wild animals that escaped from a train and were roaming the streets. And here's from the Spokane Daily Chronicle. He got in a lot of trouble. Chief of police is still mad. If he has his way, there will be no more Chargo programs on air from KWLM. But spokesmen for the station hardly feel that will be necessary to take such drastic action. The chief of police sort of hinted that he would like to start legal proceedings against Chargo. Chargo returns to the radio station. He resumed his role as leader of the orchestra of the program. He was taken off air February 9th after he stated during his program that a carload of wild animals from a circus had escaped and were roaming Wilmer streets. Frightened parents gathered their children. Doors were bolted and some armed themselves. So these were mostly the people that I had been researching while doing this. We had, the Saga dolls, we had the Henshins, Flolo, Jorgensen, Chargo. I guess I didn't really cover these guys. Henry Gafkin, Ragnall Pavarud, the Ericsons, Skandrud. Yeah, the Amundsens. And there you got sort of the location of all of these people. Sibley State Park is where the Henshins were, over in this area. The Saga dolls were here. Ole Flolo here. Clifford Gandrud was here by Sundberg. There's the Kenny's violin shop is still here in Benson. So, and then Ragnall Pavarud lived nearby Elmo, and the Kell dolls, Ole and Viola, were up here just outside of Bruton. So that's it.